Hey guys, how's it going? Today I wanted to make a video all about LECA, and my goal is that this is kind of a LECA 101 class where you can learn everything you need to know about how to maintain your houseplants in LECA. I've got a few of my LECA plants here in front of me, and I've been collecting houseplants for probably since about 2017. I've probably got, I don't know, 130, 140 houseplants now. I think at my peak I had as high as almost 300, which was a lot of plants. But I had a period of probably about a year where virtually all of my plants were in LECA. Since then, I've sort of gotten more into soil blending, making my own soil mixes. And so I have a lot more plants in soil now, but lately, the last few months, I've been getting back into LECA. So I'm hoping that this video can kind of be your one-stop shop, where if you're curious about it or you want to learn more, this is the video for you. I'm going to insert chapters into this video. I don't usually do that, but today I will. So if there's a portion that you want to learn more about, you can jump ahead. If you want to learn everything, you can just watch straight through. So first I'm going to talk about what the heck is LECA. I'll talk about kind of why to consider using it for your plants. There's a lot of pros. There's a few cons maybe, so we'll talk a little bit about those too. I'm going to show you kind of what you need to get started. There is a little bit of an initial investment when you're getting into LECA. We'll talk about how to convert plants to LECA. I actually have a few that I'm going to convert to LECA, so I'll show you how I do that as well. You have to feed your plants when they're in LECA, just like when plants are in soil. So I'll show you how to prepare nutrients for your plants in LECA. And then we'll kind of talk about how to maintain them. Once you've done all of that, how the heck do you take care of plants in LECA? So chapters should be below. If this video is interesting to you, please like the video. That helps a lot. Subscribing to the channel also helps. And if you have any questions, comments along the way, put them down in the comment section. I'm happy to respond to any questions if I happen to have an answer to one of them. So I guess we'll go ahead and get started. So first of all, if you don't know, we should probably talk about what the heck even is LECA. And LECA is an acronym. It stands for Lightweight Expanded Clay Aggregate. And if that doesn't tell you anything, that's fine. It's essentially clay pebbles. They're little clay pebbles, compressed clay that are kind of rounded into these little pebble shapes. And they're super dense, I guess, after that process, but they're also full of air and they're really lightweight. So what they do is when you put your plants in LECA, there's a lot of air gaps so that your roots can breathe. Your plants do need oxygen. And they also absorb water in a way that kind of helps to wick that water up so that the roots can also get water and nutrients while still being super aerated. If you can see, I have a little Thai constellation in LECA. You can see there's a little reservoir of water. Well, the whole glass is a reservoir, but there's water at the bottom there. And if you can see on the edges of the glass, little kind of damp patches where the LECA touches the glass, that's because it absorbs that water up so that essentially most of the LECA is damp, and it allows the roots to really breathe and have a ton of oxygen flowing through there while also getting the right amount of water and nutrients. So that's essentially what LECA is. I have an example here. I have a bag of the LECA that I almost always use. This is a well-loved bag of LECA. The brand is Hydroton. This is a 25-liter bag. It's a pretty decent-sized bag of LECA. I'm nearly out of it. And this is available on Amazon. I can put the link below. But there's a ton of different brands of LECA. For a while, IKEA sold LECA. I'm not sure if they still do. You can get it maybe sometimes at bigger garden centers. I haven't found it at very many places except for IKEA, but you can definitely order it online. So some of the LECA bowls are a little bit bigger, some are smaller. I like this Hydroton size. These are kind of the size of like marbles, maybe a little smaller than marbles. There's like smaller LECA. I've seen colored LECA, which I'm definitely not into. But I would say get whatever works for you. And then you'll be ready to start your LECA journey. It's probably a good idea to talk about why you should even use LECA or consider using LECA. So I thought I'd talk about some of the pros and cons. In my opinion, the pros definitely outweigh the cons, and the cons really have to do more with, that initial learning curve and maybe some of the startup costs. But I think LECA is great for most plants. It gives you kind of a non-soil medium that allows you to grow your plants. Like I mentioned, it allows for much better aeration than a lot of soil. There's a million different things you can do in terms of soil, but a lot of soil gets really damp and gets compact. A lot of commercial soils will keep your plants way too wet, and that'll kill your plants. They can have pests, they can have all sorts of other things. And LECA kind of not only avoids all of those issues, but it also just really allows your plants to breathe. I have to say, if you put plants in LECA, they're gonna grow faster than you ever could have imagined. So it seems like a really sort of healthy, easy alternative to soil, which is also kind of less messy than soil. Sometimes you drop your clay pebbles, but you don't have dirt all over your hands and your floors and your sinks and things like that. LECA is also sustainable, it's renewable, it's an easy resource to create, and you can virtually reuse your LECA forever. I think in the whole time I've had LECA, I've maybe bought 3 of those bags, and remember I had dozens and dozens of plants in LECA, and I still have all the same LECA. If you're wanting to reuse it, or you've got a plant that died or you're converting it to something else, you can reuse the LECA. You can wash it, you can even boil LECA or put it in your oven if you want to sterilize it, and you can renew it. So once you've got some, you've always got it, versus soil, which kind of has a lifespan and it needs to be changed out at different intervals. They also say that LECA is better at keeping houseplant pests under control than soil. When you buy soil, you never quite know what's in it. A lot of times when you get soil, it comes with fungus gnats or a lot of fungus. Have you ever had mushrooms growing in your soil? Not that that's necessarily bad for your plants, but with LECA, you kind of avoid a lot of those issues. And that damp soil is kind of like fungus gnats' favorite breeding ground. And you really take that away when you have plants in LECA. So you can still absolutely get pests if you have plants in LECA, but I think when you do use LECA, you really cut down on that pest burden significantly, which I think is a pro for anybody. There are a few cons, I suppose, to having plants in LECA. First of all, like I mentioned, there is an initial learning curve. You have to learn, how do I even take care of plants in LECA? I'm hoping that this video will be sort of the solution to that, or at least the initial solution to that. There are some startup costs, right? Maybe you have a ton of soil and all the right pots and things like that, and you do need to get some different supplies when you have plants in LECA, which I'll show you, but you do have to pay for those initially. LECA is maybe not for all plants. I've been surprised though at how happy the majority of plants are in LECA. I've got in front of me, I've got Monstera, I've got Syngonium, I have snake plants in LECA. Today I'm going to put Anthurium and Alocasia into LECA, and I've heard that those two genus specifically really thrive in LECA, better than soil. I've read that plants that have more delicate or thin roots don't necessarily love LECA as much, but everyone has a different experience. I don't have a ton of Hoya, but people who do say that Hoya just love LECA. They have fairly small root systems, but apparently they just thrive in LECA. So there's trial and error. I've lost a couple of plants maybe when converting them to LECA, but the vast majority have not only been happy in LECA, but they've thrived much better than in soil. So, you know, maybe not for every plant. You have to do your research a little bit, but I think virtually any plant can be happy in LECA. Another maybe con, however, is that there is absolutely no nutritional value to your plant in LECA. So there's water in the reservoir, which they need, but they also need nutrients. So you have to feed your plants in LECA. They're not getting nutrients from the LECA balls like they would from soil that often comes with different types of fertilizers and foods for the plants. So you do have to feed your plants in LECA. Typically you wouldn't use the same type of fertilizers you would for your plants. I'll show you what I use and what's very commonly used, but that's probably something you wouldn't have on hand, so you would again have to buy it in order to start your journey. I will say that in the maybe 3 years of having plants in LECA, I bought nutrients exactly one time, and I'm looking at them. I'll show you here shortly, but I have a ton of it left over. I haven't even used like 20% of the nutrient solution that I initially bought. So There's an initial startup cost, but then it lasts a super long time. So there's a few cons. I think the pros absolutely outweigh them by far. All right, so before we get into how all of this works, let me show you kind of what you will need if you want to get into LECA. I already showed you my bag of LECA. This brand, if you order it on Amazon, like I said, it's 25 liters. It's a pretty big bag of LECA. And this bag, depending on the size of the plants that you're putting in LECA, you could probably put 20 plants in LECA. If they're like 4 to 6 inch pots, like 20 plants, so it's a lot. I'll put the link below like I mentioned, but I think a bag like that costs maybe $30, $35. So really just, you know, $1 or $2 per plant. It's oftentimes way cheaper than a big bag of soil, depending on what soil you're using. You also need nutrients, which I have over here. Don't panic, there's a lot of bottles. I'm gonna show you guys shortly, once I move to the kitchen, how to give nutrients to your plants, and it's not difficult at all. You do have to buy the nutrient solutions though. I have 3 bottles here of nutrients from the brand General Hydroponics. This is probably the most commonly used nutrient solutions for LECA, and you use all 3 of them. They come usually as a set of 3. Maybe you can buy them separately, but you'll want to buy all 3. There's an initial cost for that. I'll link that below as well, so you can just click on everything because I don't remember what that costs, but maybe I'll put it down here below. Apart from the nutrients, you may have to buy these solutions to adjust the pH of your LECA water up or down. pH, what the heck is that? Don't panic if you feel intimidated by that. It's super easy. I'll show you how it works. There's an ideal pH range for plants that are in LECA, and not everyone's water is at that ideal range. So these allow you to adjust to the perfect range. You may or may not need to do that. Where we live now, we have well water, and it's actually the ideal pH range, so I don't have to use these at all. I test occasionally. I've tested a few times. It's always the same, so I don't even have to use these. You might have water that's a little different. A lot of city water has different concentrations of metals and chlorine and things like that that might adjust your pH outside of that ideal range. So you can correct it with these. These are sold separately again from the nutrients, but they may be necessary. And again, it's super easy. Don't be afraid. I'll show you. And then of course you need pots to put your plants in. So there's a million different options. Literally you can get super creative with your pots. Let me show you what you can't use though. You can't use your tried and true terracotta pots that have holes in the bottom. You need to be able to retain water so that your LECA can absorb it as it needs to, so the roots can absorb it as they need to. Anything with a drainage hole is not gonna work, period, for LECA, so very simple. Drainage hole, it's not gonna work. Also, terracotta absorbs water, and that would also not be good. So terracotta is not gonna be your vessel of choice, but you have tons of other options. Many of you guys probably have little decorative planters that you put your plants in. Maybe not, maybe you just have your terracotta everywhere, but a lot of us don't. We have our plants in some sort of nursery pot that we get from the plant shop, and they're not that cute, so we put them in something else. This will actually work just fine for LECA plants. This has drainage, which is what you want for your LECA plants, and this does not. So you could essentially fill this with your water and your nutrient solution. The plant in LECA goes in this guy, and it sits in there. Super easy, so you may not even need to buy new pots. It's really just anything that has drainage out is not gonna work. You've got to have something that's retaining that water. There's also a bunch of other options if you wanna get fancy. They have things like all of these, which I think are typically known as orchid pots, but things like this are really handy. These little sort of almost like mesh pots. I've used these quite a bit for smaller plants in LECA, and I don't really have a pot to set it in right now, but you get the idea, right? Like there's lots of holes in there so the water can flow through, and then you can also set one of these in whatever pot you want. They come in all sorts of different sizes. I even bought these bigger, like more legitimate orchid pots, and this would work just fine as well if you've got a big enough pot to set it in. You could put it into some other kind of container if you don't have a pot that's that big. You just need to make sure you've got enough water that can go through here. So anything that's got drainage that sits in something that does not have drainage. And as an alternative, if you guys haven't seen, I'll link a video below that I recently made. You can also use glass as a vessel for your plants in LECA. I just recently converted a whole bunch of my Monstera cuttings. I had this huge Monstera that I decided to chop up, and I put a bunch of them into these glass containers with LECA. And where is it? Here, I have a little drainage hole. If you want to see how to drill holes, drainage holes in glass, I'll link the video below. It's super easy. And a lot of the times when you have plants in LECA, you want to see how the roots are doing. And this is a perfect way to do that. Can you see all these roots? I've literally only had this plant in LECA for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and all of these crazy roots are new. So that just shows you how quickly these plants grow in LECA. I like to see how my roots are doing. So check that video out if you want to see how to do it. The drill bits for drilling in glass would be an extra cost as well, but they only cost like $5 or $6 if you have a drill already. So that's another option. And then the final option I was going to show you is there's a lot of self-watering pots these days. I've talked about these many times. I will link them below as well if you want. And this is an Albo Syngonium that I converted to LECA a while ago. It seems to be doing pretty well. I have a few other cuttings rooting in water, but this is just essentially the same idea. A little pot with drainage that I filled with LECA, and then it sits in this other pot. And it's got a little moisture meter so you know when you need to add water. So there's a ton of different options. It's actually super flexible what you use when you have plants in LECA. Only thing you're not going to be able to use is your old-fashioned terracotta. You can use that for your cacti. All right, so now that I've sort of told you what LECA is and what you need to get started, I'm actually going to show you. I'm going to move over to the kitchen. I'm going to show you how to actually convert a plant from soil into LECA. I've got a few options here behind me. I've got some alocasias. I've never put alocasias in water before, but they dry out really quickly and they don't really like that. I've heard that they absolutely love being in LECA. So I might convert one of these, and then I got a couple of Anthurium the other day. They're on the other side of the room, but I've also heard Anthurium love being in LECA, and I never had Anthurium before when all my plants were in LECA. So I've got 2 of them, and I'm going to convert both of those to LECA today. So I'll show you how that works. Once I've got my new plants in LECA, I will show you how to mix up the nutrient solution. And then I'll show you how to maintain them. It's actually super easy. I'm also going to show you a couple of not so successful stories because I've got 1 or 2 that didn't work out so well. So I'll show you those next. But for now, let's move in the kitchen and I'll show you how to convert your soil plants into LECA. Don't panic. You do not need power tools to convert your plants into LECA unless you want to do what I'm going to do. I've got some of these glass containers, and I really want to have these plants in them, but I've not yet drilled holes into them. So I'm going to drill some holes into these real quick, hopefully, so that I can use them for these plants. You do not have to. I will link the video below where I show you how to do it. These are the drill bits that I use. I've got 2 different sizes. You do not have to do this. You can use any container like I talked about. But what I'm going to do is drill. I've got 4 of these to drill into. So I'm going to lower the volume because this is noisy and speed it up. But you can kind of see the process of creating drainage in glass. So you need a glass container. You need to decide where your hole is going to go, where you want it, which should be sort of 1/4 to 1/3 of the way up. I'm doing this in my sink just for easy drainage because you also need to run water over your glass as you drill into it. And then you drill. So watch that video if you want to know how to do it. I'm going to do these hopefully fairly quickly, and we'll be back shortly to what's actually relevant, which is how do you convert your plants from soil into LECA. For the record, the first time I drilled holes in glass, it probably took me like 10 minutes to get through the glass. This just took me like less than 1 minute. You see? So I'm going to do the same thing 3 more times and we'll be back shortly. The first thing you have to do when you're going to convert your plants to LECA is wash off your LECA. The way it comes in the bag, it's very dusty and you don't want that in your water solution. It'll make it really murky. So I just rinse it off. I have a strainer here in the sink. Some people will soak their LECA. Some people will boil their LECA to sterilize it. I've never boiled LECA and I don't plan to. Unless you're going to reuse really old LECA, maybe that is something I would consider. And I don't soak it either. It will absorb some water initially over the first day or two, but I just keep an eye on it. I don't want to soak for 24 hours. When the inspiration hits, I want to do. So I'm just going to pour it in the strainer here and rinse it off. Looks like I'm going to have to order more LECA pretty soon. I should have enough for these 4 plants. I think I have a little bit more in my office. I can see a bunch of dust. Can you guys see? I just shook it out, but if you could see my sink right now, it's covered in dust. So we'll just rinse these off and then we'll be ready to go. Maybe see how dirty the water is initially. And there's a lot of dust in my sink, so give your LECA a good rinse. I will say, and I may be speaking from experience, it would be better to rinse off your LECA outside with the hose. There's a lot of dust that comes off and it's very fine, so I wouldn't really worry too much about that. There could be little, I have some like in my strainer here in my sink, I have some little like fragments of LECA, which you might not necessarily want going down your drain. I do have a strainer, so absolutely make sure you have a strainer if you're doing this in your sink. And as I said from experience, when we were living in an apartment, the year that I converted everything into LECA, I sent LECA balls down my drain and broke my rental garbage disposal. So don't do that. You want to make sure you don't have LECA going down your drain. So do it outside if you can. If not, definitely have a strainer in the sink. I love the sound of freshly rinsed LECA. It sounds like Rice Krispies. Can you hear it? It talks to you. It says, I'm ready for your plants. So I'm going to set my LECA there. I've got these 2 Anthurium and 2 Alocasia. I hope I have enough for all 4 of them. I should. But I definitely want to do my Anthurium first. I got these maybe a couple weeks ago, and I just kind of set them into these terracotta pots until I had the time to convert them. And they're already like drying out. Terracotta is not probably the best friend of Anthurium. So I'm going to get another bowl out because I've got to get as much soil as possible off of these roots before they go into LECA. So I'm going to put another bowl down here. All right. So I'm going to start with this Anthurium forgetii. I did water this just a few days ago and it's already dry. So terracotta, probably not the best idea for Anthurium. So I'm just going to start by shaking off the soil. Luckily, wow, that was pretty easy to do. There was very little soil in here, except, can you see, sometimes when you buy plants from a plant shop, they come in these little soil plugs that they grow them in. And a lot of times there's like a little mesh fabric around that that's almost impossible to get off once the roots grow through it. This doesn't look like, no, I don't think this has one because I can break this up. Don't be afraid. You will most likely lose some of your roots in this process, but trust me, the plants will grow plenty of new ones. So this soil at the top here is pretty dry. So I'm gonna now, again, I've got the strainer in my sink, just rinse off these roots. and they should be as clean as possible. This is a good root system. Should use like room temperature water. My sink is like, it goes from super hot to super cold. Try to use room temperature water. You can see the soil just kind of falling right off. Yours may or may not be as easy to do, but in this case, it's pretty easy. All right, let me rinse off the leaves too while I'm at it. Give them a full bath. If you've never taken a plant out of soil and you're panicking about this part, trust me, don't. These are soil roots, so this plant has basically probably lived its whole life in soil. You want to get as much soil off as possible, but it's kind of impossible to get absolutely everything off. But the plant will grow new roots so fast you won't hardly be able to believe it. And it'll grow water roots, which have only ever been exposed to water. They're a lot more friendly to water too. So sometimes the roots some of the roots might die off a little bit as it grows new water roots. And it's a good idea maybe a month or so after you put your plant in LECA to dump it out and give it another rinse. Get off any of these old roots that have died, and you'll be shocked the first time you take your plant out at how many new roots it has. It's also really easy to do that once they're in LECA. This soil removal, you only have to do once. Normally, the LECA just falls right off. Some new roots will kind of grow into or around the LECA, and you can just kind of leave those alone. Most of it will just fall right off, and then you can check out your root system whenever you want. So now, let's see if we can get this guy into LECA. I'm going to fill up the bottom maybe third of this pot, and if you want to see, I drilled my drainage hole right here about a third of the way up in the pot, so that it's really easy just to make sure I have the right amount of water. When you have too much water, it's just going to drain out, and that will allow you to have kind of the ideal water reservoir at the bottom. You don't want the whole plant submerged in water. I'll show you what it should look like. But once the water reaches the correct level, it stops draining. Pretty logical, right? I love this idea in glass. If you don't want to be drilling in glass, that's totally fine. Use any other combination you want. This is just kind of my new obsession. So I'm going to fill about the bottom third with LECA. You don't want the roots going all the way down. Those new water roots will grow in, and it's fine if they're exposed to the water, contrary to what many people say. On the internet, they're absolutely fine. They're water roots. But you want it to be about half to 2/3 of the way down in the pot. Okay, so I'm going to fill up with some LECA. A little bit noisy here. And I'll show you what it looks like. So I still have water in here, which is fine. But I'm going to have the LECA about to there, maybe a little bit more. About to there, so that the roots are going to sit kind of above that water level. This is really easy, right? Then what I'm going to do is just kind of nestle my plant into the LECA and fill up with LECA around it. You want to kind of position the plant in the way you want it. It's harder to adjust around those LECA pebbles. So I want it to kind of sit toward the top of the vessel. And then there's plenty of room for the LECA to kind of fall around the roots. So I might do it right here so you guys can see. But I think I like this position. I'm just going to fill in with LECA and then kind of jiggle it as I go so that it settles in around all those roots. You can see kind of what I'm working with here. So I'm just kind of sitting there. It looks a little bit like a spider, like that. But I think I'm going to have them about like that. Okay. And we'll fill in with LECA. Oh, this is fine. There's your LECA balls rolling. If you have dogs like I do, my dog always thinks LECA are dog treats, which they're not, so be careful. I have my dogs closed in the office right now. As you fill, you just want to make sure all the roots will be below the LECA. And once you get the LECA high enough up, it becomes very sturdy. Okay, I'm going to rotate this a little bit so that I can get the other side. Okay. You can kind of reposition as you need to, but once it's in there, it's very sturdy. See how easy that was? I'm going to rinse through a little bit and you'll just see how the water drains out, and your plant is kind of perfectly situated there above the water level. How easy, right? I love how that looks already, and hopefully this anthurium will be happier in LECA. Cool, right? I'm going to do this a couple more times and I'll show you when it's all done. This one was even easier, actually. There was no big root ball there like the last one. So this should go even quicker. You may see that not all the soil comes off. Some of these roots are just, they've been in soil forever. So you might not get them perfectly white, and that's fine. You just want to get as much of the soil off as you can. And I think this is just fine. Like I said, some of these old roots will die off, but the water roots that grow will grow so much faster. So it is a good idea to kind of check on them a month or so after you put them in LECA. But he's already done, so I'm going to repeat that same process for him. Okay. Do you see this one root stretching across the glass there? That'll probably develop all sorts of new water roots, but I think that's good. Let me rinse him out and see. I think that'll be perfect. That took like less than a minute, right? So you see, this is pretty straightforward process. Okay, let me do the alocasia and then I will come back and show you how to mix up and use nutrient solution. Okay, this alocasia zebrina took like 5 seconds to get all the soil off, and look how clean that is. Nice. Look at that, exactly enough. Time for me to order more LECA. Cool. All right, let me get cleaned up. I'll show you what these guys look like, and then we'll talk about nutrients. As I said, there is no nutritional value in LECA at all. Water is essential for your plants, but you also need nutrients. So you have to give your plants in LECA food. What I do, and what has always worked, I think what most people do, is about once a month I will feed my plants that are in LECA. That's this nutrient solution in front of me, diluted in water. I'll fill up the pot. The plant will absorb what it needs, and eventually the water will be gone, but there are still a lot of nutrients in the LECA around the pot. The water gets absorbed, a lot of the nutrients are left. So what a lot of people do is that when there's no more water, they'll go ahead and just fill up with water. That'll kind of re-dilute those nutrients. And they'll do that for several weeks in a row. Most people will feed their LECA with nutrient solution about once a month. So you really only have to do this process about once a month. You can kind of do what works for you, but I find that it's very easy to just notice when my plants need more water, fill up with more water, and then about once a month I'll flush out everything and top them up with the nutrient solution. I'll show you what happens when your plants have kind of probably used up plenty of the nutrients. A lot of times you'll see this white substance on top of the LECA, if you can see it. And that's just like salts that build up from the nutrients. There's no harm, it's not mold, it's not fungus, and it will absolutely just rinse off. So this, when it starts to look like this, that shows me I should probably flush out my LECA and give a fresh nutrient solution. So the way that I do that to flush them, these are always a little bit hard to get out of the container, is literally just take it out. Look at these roots growing. I should really do something about this. These are probably old roots. We'll just get rid of them. But I'll literally just take my pot out of whatever container it's in and rinse it, flush it. So you can flush it under the sink, you can flush it with the hose, and you'll see as you do that, all of those salts just kind of wash away. So about once a month I'll do this. You don't have to be fancy. I just rinse them like that. I'll rinse out the pot that they're in too, so that we can have fresh nutrient solution. And that's your flush, essentially. So this plant is ready for a fresh dose of nutrient water, which, like I said, is about once a month. In terms of your nutrients, so these are the ones that I use. These are from General Hydroponics. There's 3 of them, and they usually come as a set of 3, like I mentioned. Flora Micro, Flora Grow, and Flora Bloom. They all have different nutrient concentrations. I'm not an expert. I'm sure you can read about it. What they do say is that you should mix all 3, and what I do for simplicity is I just take a gallon, like milk container, fill it with water, and I add all of the nutrients to it. It takes just a minute, and you'll see as I do it. One thing that everyone tends to agree on, and it's even written on the back of this Flora Micro container, is that you should mix this into your water first. It talks about if you mix this with the other nutrients undiluted, you can get nutrient lockout. I don't know what exactly that is. It says it can make some minerals unavailable. So most people will add this to their water first and then add the others in any order. So you'll get dosing guidelines on the back, and it kind of depends on how aggressive you want to be with your plants. It basically says for general purpose, you can use about a teaspoon per gallon, up to, for aggressive growth, 3 teaspoons per gallon. So that's like 5 to 15 mils per gallon. I tend to go on the less aggressive side. I've never really tried to go up more, but a teaspoon or 5 mils of each is probably just fine. You could even go up further. I'm a nurse, so we always have syringes around us. I just have this little 3 mil syringe, and what I've been doing is 3 mils of each, and it seems to work just fine. I could test to see if I see a difference if I add even more nutrients, but this is what I started with, so I just continue with 3 mils, which is a little more than half a teaspoon of each per gallon. So what I do is I basically I've already shaken these. I just take the lids off, start to fill the gallon container, and then I add 3 mils of each as it goes. I always start with the Flora Micro because that's what it tells you to do. You just get kind of room temperature-y water. And as it fills, I just take 3 mils of each and add them. Give the syringe a little rinse. And you see it's kind of diluting in the water. By the time the gallon is full, I should have all my nutrients in there. Some people say you should shake your container in between each. I don't. You can. See how quick that was? I even have time to put lids on my containers before the gallon is full, almost. Quick and easy, right? Okay, final step, which you may or may not need to do depending on your water. I definitely recommend doing it in the beginning to know what sort of water you have, is you want to test your pH and adjust as necessary. So this is also from General Hydroponics. It comes with 3 solutions. There's a pH down, there's a pH up, and there's a pH test indicator in this little vial where you test your solution. So pH has to do with the acidity of your water. It can be perfect, it can be a little too acidic, it can be too basic, and you want to correct that. The ideal concentration for your plants is between 5.5 and 6.5. So to test your pH, all you have to do is fill this little vial about half full with your nutrient solution. That's what we're testing. That's the water plus all the nutrients. And then you're supposed to put in your pH test indicator solution. And it says to add 3 to 5 drops. As you add your drops, the water, which is basically clear, maybe a little pink tinged, will change color. And you have your pH indicators here at the bottom of this test vial. So it ranges from kind of red to sort of greenish blue. This is a pH of 8.5. This is a pH of 4. And you kind of want to be in that 5.5 to 6.5 range. So sort of from that orangey yellow to yellowish green. Okay. And we'll go ahead and add my drops. I just added 5 drops. See, it's a little greeny. Put on your lid and give it a shake. If I put it in front of my shirt, you can see it's kind of this greenish color. And all you do is kind of take it and compare it to your indicator. So this looks kind of right around that 6.5 range. It might be a little closer to 7. Potentially. It's not as green as 7. I think it's kind of right around, maybe in between the 6 and the 6.5. I'm going to call that just fine, because what that does is it tells me my water is fine with the nutrient solutions. I've heard your water will go a little bit more acidic as it sits. I'm not sure if that actually happens. I've never tested the theory. But this looks like we're sort of right on track to be where we want to be, and that saves me a step of having to adjust. If your pH is really low, around the 4 range, less than what it should be, you can add pH up. And if it's too high, you can add pH down. And this tells you exactly how much to use to adjust accordingly. So you would add either one to your water, give it a shake, and retest. Hopefully you're in a place where you have good water. So adjusting pH, not hard to do. If you're lucky, you won't have to do it at all. All right, guys, final step. How do you take care of these plants in LECA? This guy, this is my Thai constellation, which has always been in LECA. You can see there's a little bit of that white kind of mineral buildup on the top of the LECA. So what I'm going to do first is just rinse him out, flush him, And then I'll fill up with nutrient solution, which should usually be about 2/3 of the way up your container. Easy for me since I've drilled a hole in this one. I'm just going to start by rinsing it. The rinsing portion for me with these plants in glass is a little more complicated because of the glass. If you had it in a regular drainage pot, you could literally just lift that pot out of whatever container it's in and rinse it through with water. So this is essentially empty now, and I'll just add my nutrient solution up until that sort of 1/4 to 1/3 way up in the container. And that's it. This one's just a little high, so I'm just going to pour out a little bit. And that's it. It's that easy. Now we've got clean, happy, fresh water full of nutrients so that he can finish pushing out this new leaf that he's been working on. If you have self-watering containers, it's actually super easy too. There's a little grate in here, and I just fill up until my indicator starts to rise. And then it will literally tell me when it's empty. So it's that easy, guys. If you had a plant in something like this, obviously you just take it out of whatever container it's in, rinse it off, stick it back in, and then you can easily see how high you want the water to be. Super easy. So that's how you feed your plants in LECA, and it's that easy. Honestly, like I said, these clear glass are nice. You can use whatever you like, but they visually tell you when you're out of water, and I literally let them go essentially dry before I refill them. About once a week or as needed, I will refill just with regular water, and then about once a month, I'll flush them out and add nutrient solution to them. It's that easy. All right, let's move back over to the plant room. I'm going to show you my plants in LECA, show you a couple that maybe didn't do so well in LECA, and we'll do a little recap. Wow, I don't think I've ever been surrounded by so many LECA plants before. I did want to show you something which I thought would be a great idea and turned out not to be such a success. As I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, I made a video about putting plants into glass containers, drilling holes in them, and I found all these glass bricks at Michael's, and I thought, ooh, these would be really cool, like propagation vessels. I was going to say proposition. So I drilled a hole in this one here in the back and put, I think this was marble queen pothos in it to propagate. It was like one vine, and it kind of went across the top here. And as you can see, it didn't really succeed. I think it's basically dead. And what I realized was with the LECA, when the water is only up to about here, it's not getting enough water to propagate. So I don't recommend propagating in LECA in this form necessarily. It may work. I don't think it works very well. What you could do is put it in a container that doesn't drain and fill up that container so that you've got LECA and water if you wanted to. Essentially, I think just propagating in water is more successful. And when you have decent water roots, that would be the time to put it in LECA. So this guy was not a success. So PSA, maybe don't propagate in LECA in this way. But let's get him out of the way because all the other plants look so good. All right, that's it for today. I hope that this video served as sort of a LECA 101 class like I mentioned. Let me know if I've forgotten something and you still have questions. Just put them in the comments below and I can answer if I know the answer. Otherwise, you guys can help each other. I will let you know how these plants go. Follow me on Instagram if you like. I post on Instagram all the time and I post a bunch of plant pictures. So Nikas Arbata is my name on Instagram. You can see that link in the comments. And yeah, what are your experiences with LECA? Have you had a big success you can tell us about? Any fails? I'm really excited. As you can see, I've got monstera, I've got snake plants, now I have alocasia, now I have anthurium. I've got other plants. I have an avocado seed that I'm trying to grow in LECA right now. That is in a container that's not, doesn't have drainage holes. I have a Spiritus Sancti that I ordered, tissue culture that's sitting on a heat mat doing its thing in LECA right now. I have plants on moss poles that are in LECA, so you can do all sorts of things with it. Possibilities are endless. Anyway, I hope you guys found this video helpful. Please like the video if you did. That really helps. Comment below, that also helps, and I like to engage with you guys and hear what you're up to. And subscribe to the channel. Okay? I think that's it for today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you found it informative. Go out and get some LECA and give it a try. Try with one plant. It actually is a lot of fun, and I really like the way LECA looks in glass. I will also link that video as mentioned below if you want to learn how to drill holes in glass. Don't be afraid. I did 4 of them today in 5 minutes. It's easy. None of them broke. So that's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and until next time, take care, guys.